Oh, now I only see his name down there.
All right. Now can you hear me?
Oh, there you go.
Yes, I can.
Paul
All
Radcliffe.
right.
Finally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go.
So are we ready to talk?
Exactly. I actually just talked to Coach Rex Wells today.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Did he call you or what?
He called me and he has donated to the program and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
you
Good for
know,
him.
from, and I got to show you a couple of things. I'm sure you have one of these.
Yep, I do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have one of these?
Yes, I do.
You do. And do you have one of these?
Yes, Valley Boys. You bet. I've read all that stuff. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Springs Valley.
Can Lori leave right now?
Yes, you can if you like.
Okay. Okay. She just didn't want to leave and leave me hanging here.
Okay, so you're all set up.
And thank you, Lori.
Okay.
I said thank you.
Okay.
And did you say something bad about Indiana State University?
Well, I was going to tease you a little bit. Oh, Lordy. I know that's where Larry went to school, so I don't say too much about that for sure.
And where did you see that behind? Why did you say Indiana State University?
I don't know. I must have seen, well, because Larry Bird, he went there. So that's why. Yeah. I went to IU.
Of course you did. What do you think? What do you think about the Indiana University program, by the way?
Well, it's on its way up. It sounds like they have a pretty good team this time. They've been down the last couple of years. I used to watch every game, but I got tired of watching them lose. So they got the new coach in now, so I think they're going to be better. Get it back up to where it should be.
Do you watch the ball games or?
Occasionally, I kind of got off of them when they started losing all the time. So I got tired of watching them because the team they had before, I don't know, they just didn't seem to make any improvement. They brought in some really good players, but they didn't get along very well in terms of the position on the floor or something. They just could not get a winning streak going, so I think the new guy is going to turn that all around, though. I hope so.
And I am too, because he went to Broad Ripple High School, and so did I. Went to Broad Ripple High School, and he was coached by my coach, Bill Smith, who was just inducted into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. So, Dr. Radcliff, what does Rick Wells mean to you?
Rex?
Yes.
Rex is everything to me. I don't know if you know all the background, but I first started to know him when I was in elementary school, and he was like a senior in high school. And he was the hero of this little town, West Baden. And I was a hero worshiper. And every time I'd see him, walking on campus or something, I'd say, I want to be like that guy. And I'd go to the basketball games, and he was like 8 years older than I was. And of course, he was a star player at West Baden High School. And I always wanted to be like him. And then when he came back from the Army, or he came back before he went to the Army, got drafted, he started to coach our 7th and 8th grade team. And we went undefeated on that team for like eight or 9 games. And then he had to go to basic training, and they sent him to Germany. So we finished that 7th and 8th grade team year. It's an interesting year because we played 18 games, I think it was, and we won a big tournament over in Logoti. We won the end of the year tournament over there, and we finished up 16-2. And the only 2 losses we had were both of them to Huntingburg, and both of them in overtime. That became interesting because in high school, we had to beat Huntingburg in that sectional final to get going into the regional and semi-state and state. So that's quite a story, you know, that we would only lose to Huntingburg in junior high, but we beat them in high school when it really counted.
What was it like to play in Huntingburg and Springs Valley? Tell us a little bit about the gymnasiums that you played in, and that 1958 season is magical.
It is magical. When we were in junior high and playing Huntingburg, Huntingburg didn't have that big gym then. I remember playing Huntingburg in a little bitty gym that's very similar to the one we had at Spring or at the West Baden. And then they were the first one in Southern Indiana to build a big, nice gymnasium like that. I think they might have had it a year or so before we actually played them. And that to us at West Baden and French Lake, that gymnasium was like playing at Butler Fieldhouse. I mean, it was a huge gymnasium, it was, and every time we ever played there, of course, with the sectional and regional, it was packed. Crowds, the big crowds. And the more times we won a tournament, the bigger the crowd got, so yeah, but we knew about those guys at Huntingburg because we had played them in junior high. Like I said, in junior high, we won 16 and lost 2, and we lost both of those games to Huntingburg by 1 point. Both of them were 1 point. So we were excited to play Huntingburg, and everybody thought Huntingburg was going to wipe the floor with us, and they didn't. We beat them 65-41.
And what was it like to play in Hinkle Fieldhouse? I know it's not Hinkle Fieldhouse now. It is Hinkle Fieldhouse now, but what was it like to play in Butler Fieldhouse?
It was an experience that I'll never forget, and all the guys will never forget. We got there on the day before, Friday, because every team got to go on the floor for an hour and a half. And just being out on the floor, shooting, running your offense, things like that you'd only seen on TV. And we thought we were hot stuff, playing on that floor. And the thing was, you'd love this. When we practiced that day, 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000 people came out to watch us practice. Just practice. It was like playing in front of a big crowd. I mean, it was amazing. And I don't know what the other 3 schools drew, but of course we were the talk of the whole tournament. We were the darling team, And when we practiced and we could not miss. That was the other thing I wanted to tell you about, is that we not only practiced and we ran our offense and everything, but all our shooting drills, we just hit it time after time after time. And I remember that Jet Cadu, who was the sports writer of the Star, Indianapolis Star, and he wrote an article about he'd never seen anybody shoot like that. He said they made every shot. It was amazing how a lot of times when you're used to playing in a small school, you get in a big place and it's like, whoa, my vision's a little off. But it was not off that day before we played Fort Wayne. We were all hot. We couldn't miss. It was amazing.
And man, 28-0 before you guys got beat, right?
25-0.
25-0. And so why did you guys move to Florida?
Well, my dad was a mailman, a rural mailman, had done that for like 30 years, and he had a lot of arthritis and things like that. So he wanted to move to Florida for his health. And of course, right after that 58 season is when he was scheduled to move the family to Florida. And of course, I didn't want to go to Florida. And Rex even told him, said, "Hey, he can stay with me. He can stay with me for the year." And my dad wasn't buying that. He said, "No, he's going to Florida." And boy, that was hard to leave, because we had a really good bunch of guys coming back in 1959. And they had a good team anyway. 59, they lost to Huntingburg by 1 point. If they had beaten Huntingburg that day, they might have gone right back to Indianapolis the very year. So it was hard to go to Florida. But as I look back on it, for me, it was a blessing for me, because I'll tell you a little story about what happened there. I moved to Florida. Bob Patton, who played at Orleans, he was a good basketball player. He was a guard for Orleans. And a player from Logansport, Indiana, moved to the same school as we did. So we had 3 Hoosiers in that school, that Fort Myers High School in Florida. And they had 2 good players coming back from the year before. So all of a sudden, Fort Myers High School in Florida was a powerhouse. We had 5 really good players on that team. And so all of a sudden we start having big crowds at our games in Florida, and they had never had big crowds because they just didn't draw. Football was a big thing down there. So when we all showed up and started playing basketball, but the crowd started coming, we started playing really, really well. We got to the point where we were top ranked in the state of Florida. And we played people like Boog Powell. He used to be a major league player. He was on the team in Key West. George Myra, we played against him. Well, we played against a lot of guys that became famous in other sports. So we had a good schedule. We were in the 5A division, which they have 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, and 5A. We played 5A. And so we had a great team. We had big crowds, and we qualified for the state at the University of Florida. That's where they had a 8-team state. We won the first 2 rounds, and we drew Pensacola. We were top rated. We were rated number 1. Pensacola was rated 8. That was the first game. They beat us on a last second shot. They hit one at the buzzer, and we're out. We're done. And we should have won the state championship in Florida that year, just to be honest with you. We all stayed up there to watch the rest of the tournament. We just couldn't believe we weren't out there winning that tournament. We should have been. We didn't play very well that first game, but we got beat. So what happens?
How good were you at baseball?
Well, I didn't play very much baseball. I played at Springs Valley, and the best game I ever pitched down there, I was a pitcher. And I pitched in 1958, the very same year, because we beat Du Bois twice, that year in basketball. So we played them in baseball, and we went. Don Patrick, who was their center on that team, Don Patrick, he and I were pitching against each other. We had played basketball against each other. We went 14 innings, and they scored 3 runs in the 14th inning, and Du Bois beat me 4-1. And Don Patrick and I always talked about that, that we beat you in basketball, you beat us in baseball, And so I went to Florida, and I played baseball, but I wasn't very good. I mean, I pitched a little bit. I just didn't have really good seasons in baseball. But then when I went to college, I played baseball my freshman year at Kentucky Wesleyan's, where I went to college. And I didn't pitch a lot. I played first base and so forth, but I didn't pitch a lot. But then my sophomore year, I had a tremendous year in baseball. I pitched 6 shutouts in my sophomore year in baseball, and we got to go to the tournament. They sent us to Valparaiso. We played at Valparaiso in the NCAA Division II tournament, and we got to the final game and played Valparaiso, and I pitched against them, and they beat me 5-1. They had a pitcher that was throwing smoke out there. He was a really good pitcher, about 6'5", throwing the ball 95 miles an hour. And it's funny because we had a really good team. And when we played Valparaiso, this pitcher against us was throwing the ball 90, 95. He was really throwing the ball. The first pitch of the game, he hit our leadoff man in the head. So we didn't hit very well the rest of the game. And then I hurt my arm as a junior. I know I had probably some kind of injury. They didn't have all the things that they have now with rehabilitating your arm injuries and so forth. And I could barely pick up a ball. In fact, when I was a senior, I tried to pitch again. I had so much arm trouble. I had to throw. I remember the last game I played in, I pitched the last inning in the game, and I could hardly get the ball to the plate. And I threw nothing but knuckleballs in that one inning, all knuckleballs. And that was the end of my baseball career. But the year before, that was my senior year. My junior year, I had a great career in baseball. And in the summertime, I got recruited by a couple of major league teams. They wanted me to play minor league baseball, and they would give me $1,000 bonus to play. It was Detroit and Kansas City, and they both gave me the same offer. We want you to pitch. We'll give you $1,000, and you get what, $200 a month or whatever it was. And I thought about that, and I said, I don't think so. I better just stay here and get my degree and move on. Because I was leery of that. When they give you a total in the major leagues, and you're down at the bottom of their contacts, they're just using you. They need enough players to field the team. I don't think they were looking at me as a future major leaguer or anything. So I turned both of those down. I didn't take them. I just focused on basketball.
So what other choices did you have to play college basketball besides Kentucky Wesleyan?
Well, that's a good question, because it was one of the most fun times of my entire life. When you get asked to fly in, to work out, to look at campuses, all this kind of thing, all of a sudden your ego gets really big, So I got flown into Clemson, and I worked out there on the weekend, and Press Maravich was coaching Clemson at the time. Pete was his son. And I'll tell you this story. It's an old story, but it's a good story. He had another recruit come in the same time that I did on a Friday afternoon. So he assigned one of his own players to escort us around the campus and all that. So on Saturday morning of that week, he wanted us in the gym. He put us in the gym, and we played a 2-on-2. I learned later on you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to work out people when they come in. Today you can't do that. Maybe in those days it was okay. I don't know. Who knows? I didn't know anything. But on the other end of the floor, you would love this. There was nobody else in the gym. The only guy that was on the floor besides the 4 of us playing 2-on-2 was the manager, because he was kind of in charge of us. And Press Maravich sat way up in the top, so nobody could see that he was there. And but on the other end of the floor was this kid, like 12 years old. And we kept looking at him. Every time we looked down there, he was drilling a 30-footer. He made every shot that he ever took. And we later found out that was Pete Maravich. You know, Pete Maravich is the all-time leading scorer, all time. And we got to see him play. When he was 12 years old, you should have seen him drill the ball when he was 12 years old. He was amazing. So we got to go to, took a trip to Clemson. Then the next weekend I went to South Carolina. What was that other one out there? Can't think of the name of the school, but we did the same thing there. We worked out South Carolina, and I forget who the name of the coach was up there. At Davidson, that's what it was, Davidson. And they had just hired a new coach. And the year before, they had won 3 games and lost 21. And he's trying to convince us to sign. And I'm thinking, 3-21? No, I'm not going to go there. And he kept saying, yep, you need to come here because we're building this, and you're going to be surprised at how good we can be and how quickly we'll be good. But we, of course, we're 18 years old. We didn't believe that, you know. So the very next year, I think it was the next year, they were rated number 3 in the country, and they had an All-American. Fred Hetzel was an All-American on their team. They only lost 3 games, and I can never remember his name, the coach. But anyway, they proved me wrong. They were good. They were very good. The coach had come. He had just come there. He had coached at Newport News High School in Virginia. And he was trying to convince everybody that, yeah, we're going to build this program down here. But of course, when we're 18 years old, we don't believe that, you know. So, but he did. And that program was good. And he eventually went to Maryland, coached Maryland. So that was 2 trips. And then I visited Florida, Auburn, Florida Southern, and Wesleyan, Kentucky Wesleyan. That was my last one, was at Wesleyan. And that's the one I accepted. Because I thought I liked Wesleyan. I liked the small school atmosphere there. And they had a record of being very good in the Division II level. And I liked the coach, Coach T.L. Plain. I don't know if you remember T.L. Plain or not. He coached Vincennes. Great guy. And I made the right decision. I loved Owensboro. I loved Wesleyan. I loved playing baseball there. I loved playing basketball there. And it was the right decision for me. I felt like I was a tweener. You know, I figured I could play Division II and be happy with that. Division I, I didn't want to go someplace in Division I and sit on the bench for 4 years. You know, so I chose to play at Owensboro at Kentucky Wesleyan, and I'm glad I did. I really am.
2 names, and maybe I'm wrong, Wayne Boltinghouse and George Tinsley.
Yep.
Did you play under either of those, play or with those?
George Tinsley came after we left. He was one of those guys that they recruited right after I left, you know, and in 2 years they won the NCAA tournament with those guys. Tinsley was one of the major players. So I didn't know George. Boltinghouse was from Rockport. And I don't know, I never did play against Wayne in anything, maybe baseball, but I'm not even sure that's true. But I knew him, we knew each other, but I don't think we ever played against each other or with each other.
Florida Mr. Basketball, 1960, right? So is it as big as Indiana Mr. Basketball, or tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's selected by sports writers. That's the first thing. That's how I got it. They in Florida, what they said, Mr. Basketball was the person who got the most votes from the sports writers. So I did. I got the most votes for it. And I tell you, I got to Florida just in time for them to start being a basketball powerhouse, because really prior to 1958, Florida's high schools, they weren't that good in basketball, but when I moved to Florida, I told you we had three Indiana boys move in that same high school at the same time, called us the Indiana Hotshots is what they named us right away. And we started packing the gyms, every gym we played in was full house. So right away it began to look like Indiana. It was a popular sport. And their way of selecting the best player in the state was for sports writers to vote on it. And that's the one that got the most votes was Mr. Basketball. And that's how come I got it.
How did you get to Colorado?
Well, my best friend and ally, Dr. Wells, was the one. First of all, I spent 10 years at a junior college in Florida, in Fort Myers, as a baseball coach and teacher. And I also, at the same time, I had come to Bloomington a couple of years, and were working on my doctorate. So that I wanted to be a high school administrator, a high school principal. And so I earned my PhD through IU. And to do that, I had to take, after 3 years at Edison Community College, which is where I was working, IU wanted me to come back for another year as part of the program to get the PhD degree. So my president of the Edison Community College said, we'll let you go to Indiana, but you have to promise to come back and give us at least 3 years. I said, well, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I would never have been able to go had they not turned me loose and let me go. And they paid me half salary too at the same time. So that was a good deal for me. So we went back to Bloomington and we worked on the degree, and we eventually got the PhD. And I went back to Edison to fulfill that three-year promise. And during that time, I was recruited by some teams around the country to come and be their baseball coach, which I really wasn't interested in being a lifetime baseball coach. I wanted to be in administration by that time. That's what my goal was. I remember Elon College in North Carolina flew me up there and took me to the country club and all that kind of thing and tried to get me to come up there. And I just didn't want to do that. And I was going to use that as a backup if I had to, but I didn't want to do it. And but when they gave me a year off at Edison Community College so I could go back to IU, the deal was I owed them 3 years. When I came back, I owed the junior college 3 years. So I came back and I put a couple of years in, and Rex called me. He called me like August the 30th, right before school started. And he said, hey, I'm opening a new school here, and I want you to come out and be my assistant principal and my athletic director. And I said, man, the timing is awful. I can't, I still owe the junior college another year or two. And I remember hanging up on him he hung up the phone, and I talked to my wife like, oh man, just what we wanted, and it didn't happen. It's like, I don't know if this will ever happen again. So after we got over that, I taught and coached baseball 3 more years at the community college. So a total of 10 years. And in 1977, it's almost the same exact thing happened about 30th of August. Rex called me again. And he said, I want you to come out and be my athletic director and assistant principal. And so my wife and I flew out there, out to Fort Collins. And Rex and his wife showed us around. And I was so impressed with Fort Collins, so impressed with the high school and just the beautiful mountains and all that kind of thing. So I went back home and resigned. I resigned the first day of school at Edison Community College. And we started trying to figure out how we're going to get to Colorado, So Rex bailed me out after I bailed him out the first time. Yeah, he's always been my best friend. I have wanted to be like Rex ever since he was a high school kid, and I was just a little grade school kid.
And Rex is maybe 10 years older than you?
He's 10 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what was it like to get a court or a gymnasium named after you?
Well, it was a total surprise. It was when I retired. I was at that high school for 26 years. I wanted to be a principal. That's what I wanted to be. And I kept getting passed over, or I was a runner up, I don't know how many times, not just at Rocky Mountain High School, but at other schools in the community. And about the time I thought, well, this is never going to happen. I guess I'm just going to always be an AD or assistant principal or whatever. But it's a funny story. Rex had already retired from education. He was working in his tax preparation business at that time, so he wasn't even there. So in 1997, we were checking all of the kids out of school. It was the last day of school, and the secretary or the principal came into our room. I was checking out kids and checking out staff and trying to finish up the school year. She came in there and she says, "Superintendent wants to see you right now." And I got my attention. I thought, well, what happened? Was something wrong? I didn't know what was going on, And I said, why don't you call back and tell him I'm busy and I'll be down there later. So she comes back in there. She says, no, you're not going to go later. You're going to go right now. So I did. So I got my car and went over there. I walked into the administration building, walked up the stairs where the superintendent's office was. I just walked in his office and he looked at me and said, "You're the new principal at Rocky Mountain High School." And then he turned back and was working at his desk again. He didn't say anything else about it. So I'm stunned, it's like, I don't know what's going on here. I thought I was never going to be the principal. And so I went back to school, and first thing I did was walk into Pearl's office. Pearl was the principal's secretary. And I said, "Can you believe this? I just went to see the principal or the superintendent. He said, I'm the new principal." And I said to her, and she was fantastic. She had been the principal for every person that had ever had that job, and every principal that ever had that job. She was the principal. She was the secretary. Well, so I wanted to go back. I wanted her to. She was going to retire. I went back into Pearl's office and I said, would you do me a favor? Would you stay with your job one more year and teach me how to be a principal? And she did. Can you believe it? She did. She was going to retire, and she did not retire. She stayed one more year, and that was got like gold to me, because she knew everything. You know how the principal secretary knows everything about school. And she taught me more in that 1 year than I ever learned anyplace else. It was just amazing. So I was so fortunate that my dream of becoming a high school principal finally happened when it looked like it was never going to happen, you know. So
What did you think when Timothy Wright wanted to write this book?
well, I was excited because I thought that book was going to be written long before that. And then I remember him. Yeah, there you go. I remember Tim calling us, you know, and telling us what he wanted to do, and he wanted to know. He called every player and Rex and all the coaches. And he wanted to know all about what was that like. Tell us about that year, how exciting it was. And we all got excited about the fact, because we always thought, you know, when we watched Hoosiers on TV or at the movies, we always thought we should be doing that movie. We ought to be in that movie. And so we thought, well, we're not in the movie, but this is the next best thing, you know. So we were really excited, and he was excited too. So it was fun to relive that.
What do you think would have happened if you would have stayed in Indiana for the next 2 years?
It would have been the biggest mistake I ever made. Junior Civet, I don't know if you've ever heard that name. He was the superintendent at Paoli, which that's where the opening was in Paoli. And Junior and I had, this is a funny story too. He and I had been best friends since we were little boys. He went to Paoli High School. I went to West Baden, and then Springs Valley. And so we played baseball and basketball against each other several times during that time. And then we both went to IU in Bloomington to work on our doctorate without even knowing what the other person was doing. We did it at the same time. He and I were in Bloomington working on our doctorates at the same time. And so we applied for some kind of aid as a graduate student, and we both got the same aid. We both got that, and they placed both of us in the same office. So all of a sudden, who used to be my biggest rival was now working with me, you know. And it was great because we had Lori. Lori was a little baby, and they had a little boy. So we became really good friends, and we both got our doctorate at the same time. It was just unbelievable. And he was the one that became the superintendent in Paoli, that wanted me to come to Paoli to be his high school principal. That's how that worked out. Small world, huh?
Yes, it is. If you could change anything, what would you change?
I would change. I wanted to be a principal longer than 4 years. That's the only thing I would have changed. You know, when my dad wanted to move the family to Florida, of course, I was really in opposition to that. I didn't want to do that. I really believe, this is kind of a conceited remark, but I just believe that had I been back at Springs Valley one more year, that we might have gone right back to Indianapolis again, because they had a really great team that in '59, because they still had Marvin Pruitt, who was All-Stater. They had Jackie Belcher, who ended up going to LSU. They had Jimmy Conrad, who played at Purdue. They had a really good team coming back. And I wanted to be on that team because I really felt, we all felt like we get that chance again, we're going to win the whole thing the next time. And so that's what was bugging me, you know, was leaving a possible Indiana State championship, you know, to go to Florida. But I understand what my dad had to do. And I'm glad that I had all the opportunities because I went to Florida, you know. So you never know. You think you know everything when you're 16 years old, but you don't.
So you possibly could have been the third most popular person in Springs Valley behind Larry Bird and Jerry Reynolds.
Possible, you know, it's possible. Yeah, Jerry did very well. I mean, it's unbelievable what he did, you know. And then of course Marvin was a really, really good basketball player, you know. I remember Marvin as an elementary school kid, he was better than any high school kid when he was in elementary school.
What was it like growing up in Springs Valley?
Well, it's funny, you know, there are two little towns, one is right next to the other, West Baden and French Lick. And I can't believe that it took them that long to consolidate. They should have. It's consolidated long before that, but you know why they didn't? Because each one of them wanted their own basketball team. I mean, that's the honest truth. They couldn't give up their basketball. And as luck would have it, the year that Rex took the job as basketball coach, we consolidated that same year. And all of a sudden, they had some good players. We had some good players. Put them together. Now we really have something going there. We were excited. That was the most exciting year I think you could ever have. We won 25 straight games until we lost that final game. And we beat good teams like Gersmeyer, Princeton, Huntingburg, Vincennes. We beat all those teams. It was really fun. Yeah.
Was Slick Leonard or Tommy John on one of those teams?
No, that was before us. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I used to watch Slick Leonard play on WTTV in Bloomington.
Dr. Paul Radcliff, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think there will be a lot of excitement and enjoyability. I just made up a word, enjoyability, for the program. So I'm sorry to keep you a little bit long. Thank you so much.
No, I could talk about this all day. I feel blessed that I was in the right place at the right time for a lot of things. And when Rex said, you know, you ought to talk to him, that excited me even more because I got to reveal all the kinds of things that happened, you know. So I appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. You have a good day.